Illusia used to be a regular dude, but one day, he finds himself transformed into a dragon egg, and he's in the same situation as Doofenshmirtz because neither of his parents showed up for his birth. The first thing he sees is a screen, and he is informed by a voice in his head that his status window will display information about his abilities, which seems handy, but then Illusia realizes he should be concerned about the fact that he's hearing a voice in his head. The voice explains that she is part of the skill, Divine Voice, and her job is to explain things involving his status and abilities. He asks if this world is a game of some kind, but the voice tells him she can't provide that information since the Divine Voice skill is still only level 1. Illusia then asks if she can at least tell him where he is, but the voice once again refuses to answer any non-status related questions, and Illusia gets so frustrated that his egg ends up rolling off a cliff. By the time he stops, the system informs him that he just received a falling damage resistance ability, but it came at a cost because his HP went down by 1 point. And when you've only got 5 HP, that's a pretty big deal. Illusia ends up rolling over to the edge of a lake, and there, he sees his reflection for the first time in this world, and this is when he realizes that he is a literal egg. The system informs him that he is a dragon egg, an F-rank monster, and if his shell is somehow destroyed, he will die. Illusia is already upset about the situation, but to make things worse, the system tells him that dragon eggs are powerless and single-digit IQs, so rolling around is pretty much all he can do right now. They do have the potential to become a fearsome dragon once they hatch, but if you've ever watched Nat Geo Wild, you know the odds of surviving without turning into a protein snack are really low. Illusia starts freaking out, and all his shaking causes him to start rolling down the hill, but he ends up falling off another ledge and his HP drops to 3, so he decides to stay put for the meantime because he can't risk taking any more damage. By nightfall, Illusia's HP has finally regenerated, so it's safe for him to start moving again. He breaks into a slow roll across the floor, and as he does so, he starts thinking about what his life as an egg is going to be like. Being an egg may suck, but sooner or later, he's going to hatch into a dragon and become extremely powerful, so he decides to make that his mission. However, as he is rolling through the forest, he ends up coming across another creature. He gets a little closer to take a look and finds out that this thing is called a dark worm, and according to its stat screen, it has the title of Egg Eater. Yeah, this isn't good. Illusia immediately starts rolling away for dear life, but at the speed the worm is chasing him, simply running away isn't going to be enough to get him out of this mess. The worm currently has 8 health points, which is more than Illusia's max health, so if he tries headbutting it, he's going to die first. Just then, he remembers that he received some fall damage resistance earlier today, so he decides to use that to his advantage and lures the worm over a nearby cliff before tricking it into jumping off with him. By the time they both hit the ground, Illusia is still in one piece thanks to his fall resistance and the fact that he landed on top of the worm's body, so the system informs him that he has received 12 experience points for successfully killing the worm. As a result, he has leveled up and met the requirements for evolution, so the system then shows him the evolution tree and asks which path he would like to take, the baby dragon tree or the little dragon tree. Illusia has no idea what the difference between the two is, so the system starts explaining to him that little dragons are a dwarf species of dragon, but while they may be small compared to other dragons, it can still grow to around the size of a bear, and it also has a deadly fire-breathing ability. In contrast, the baby dragon doesn't really have much going for it aside from the fact that it has the potential to evolve into many different dragon species, but it does taste really good with soy sauce, so Illusia might end up in an episode of Delicious in Dungeon if he chooses that one. Illusia really isn't interested in becoming a meal, so the little dragon seems like the safest option to him, but just as he is about to choose, he hears a voice telling him that he needs to grow stronger and aim for the top. This voice was completely different from the system's voice, and he has no idea where it came from, but it seemed to be referencing his evolution choice. The little dragon may be the safest choice right now, but the baby dragon has more potential for growth down the line, so even if it may be a risky play, Illusia decides to go with the baby dragon evolution tree. After the evolution is complete, all of his stats go up by a decent amount, but his HP wasn't fully regenerated, so he still needs to rest to restore it. Just then, Illusia's stomach begins to rumble, and his eyes start wandering over to the worm's corpse because it looks really appetizing for some reason. Illusia assumes that this must be his baby dragon instinct at work because he would normally never consider eating a worm, but it's not like he has many options for food right now, so he decides to go for it, and it tastes just as bad as he thought it would. The next morning, Illusia wakes up after taking a nap, and his health has been fully restored, but he still has to deal with the fact that he's a baby dragon now. He has no idea why he was reincarnated into this world, who was responsible for it, or even who he was before he was reincarnated. He is fairly certain that he used to be human, but he can't remember any clear details of what his past life was like. Just then, Alucia notices a group of dark worms gathering behind him, and now that he is no longer an egg, he is able to fight back and slice them to bits one after the other. Killing all the worms earned him a ton of experience, so he was able to raise his level to 3 all in one go. This level jump allows him to access the baby fire-breathing ability, so he uses it to kill even more worms until he eventually reaches level 7. He then continues farming worms until he cracks level 15, and with how quickly he has managed to level up, he can't wait to see what his next evolution will be. Just then, Alucia's stomach begins to growl, and he realizes that he's probably going to have to eat more of these worms if he wants to keep fighting at max strength, but these things are really gross. He wants to try eating something else instead, so he looks around and eventually spots some mushrooms on the ground that look pretty tasty, but then he's reminded why you never eat random forest mushrooms. Those things were riddled with poison, and he barely managed to survive just now, but it did grant him a poison-resistant skill, so it wasn't a complete waste of time. Alucia still doesn't want to eat the worms, so he decides to head out into the forest to look for some new prey, and a few minutes into his search, he spots a gray wolf. The wolf is bigger than he is, but Alucia's stats are higher, so he decides to go after it and starts running alongside the wolf. He then fire punches it to death, and after inspecting the corpse, he realizes that he can use his flames to grill the meat. A few minutes later, Alucia is holding a perfectly cooked piece of wolf meat, and it's the best thing he has tasted ever since arriving in this world. He wants to get more of it, so he decides to start hunting wolves exclusively so he can eat their meat once he is done for the day. Thanks to all his hard work, by evening, Alucia has reached level 20, and his next evolution is set to take place once he reaches level 25. However, the rate at which he levels up slows down the higher his level gets, so it won't be as easy going forward. On the bright side, since he has been using his baby breath so often, he has gotten pretty good at grilling meat, so his food situation is solved. Though, he wishes he had someone to talk to besides the system since she never answers any of his important questions. Just then, Alucia hears voices coming from nearby in the forest, and he may not understand what is being said, but it means there are other people here, so he goes to check it out. The voices were coming from a group of humans, and Alucia wanted to go talk to them, but that would be difficult to do as a dragon. Individually, none of the humans are as strong as Alucia, but they do have the numbers advantage, so exposing himself to them might be risky, but he doesn't want to be alone forever, so he decides to go out anyway. Unfortunately, he forgot about the fact that baby dragon meat tastes great with soy sauce, so the second the adventurers see him, they immediately attack for an easy meal. He tries to tell them he doesn't want to fight, but he can't speak their language, so one of the humans slashes him across the chest, and the other uses a lightning spell to stun him. Alucia realizes this was a huge mistake, so he tries to run away, but the lightning has already made his legs go limp, so there's nothing he can do. The adventurers begin closing in to finish him off, but at the last second, the girl with them steps in to stop them because she feels bad for Alucia. The next time Alucia opens his eyes, he sees the girl healing his wounds, and he is sincerely grateful that she chose to defend him. The other two don't understand why she cares so much about a random dragon that could have been their meal for the night, but if she wants to keep it alive, they aren't going to stop her. Alucia takes a look at her stat screen and finds out that her name is Miria and she is an Earth human. She's also using the last of her MP to heal him right now, and Alucia has already regained mobility in his legs, but he knows that Miria will likely leave once she realizes that he is healed, so he pretends to be hurt a little longer. Alucia still doesn't understand the words Miria is saying, but from listening to her, he received a skill called Greek language, and if he levels it up, then he will be able to understand her better. Just then, Alucia hears loud screams coming from further into the forest, and he realizes it must have been the other adventurers who were with Miria. For them to have screamed like that, there must be a ridiculously strong monster nearby, and if that's the case, there's no way they survived an encounter like that. Miria wants to go check on her friends, but Alucia grabs her coat to stop her because it's too dangerous. Especially since she has no MP left, but Miria doesn't understand the warning he's trying to give and runs off regardless. Alucia may not know what kind of monster is out there, but he knows for a fact that none of the humans can beat it, so he needs to go save them. But his legs are still a little numb, so it's hard for him to move. By the time he finally makes it all the way over to the site of the screams, he is shocked to find a giant C-rank rock dragon, and it has over 200 HP, which is way higher than the 30 HP Alucia has. Normally, he would turn around and run away as fast as he can because he doesn't want to fight this thing. But then he sees Miria collapse on the floor, and he doesn't want to leave her behind, so it looks like he has no choice but to stand his ground. He has no idea how he's supposed to beat a monster like that. Just then, the voice in Elusia's head starts yelling at him to run away if he wants to live, and Elusia knows the divine voice is right, but he can't just leave Miria to die after she saved his life a few minutes ago, so even if it puts his life at risk, he needs to do something. He reveals himself to draw the dragon's attention away from Miria, and as the dragon charged towards him, he uses his roll skill to dive out of the way before slamming into its face. After landing, Elusia notices one of Miria's teammates lying on the ground nearby, but his HP is already a big fat 0, so there's no helping him now. The other guy was a bit luckier since he's still got 5 HP in the tank, but he's still being crushed by a tree, so he won't last much longer. Elusia needs to do something quickly if he wants to save them, so he comes up with the idea to provoke the dragon even more by bouncing against its head and running away to get it to chase him. This way, he should be able to lead the dragon away from the people, and then circle back to rescue them. However, the dragon isn't as gullible as Elusia thought it would be, because instead of simply chasing him across the forest, it uses one of its skills to destroy the ground in front of Elusia and send him crashing to the ground. The dragon then lunges at him, so Elusia decides to fight back and throws a fire punch right into its mouth. He's really proud of himself because that attack actually did a significant amount of damage to the dragon, but a few moments later, to Elusia's horror, the dragon's health bar fills right back to the top as it regenerates itself. There's absolutely no way he is ever going to defeat this thing in his current state, so he needs to make his escape while the dragon is still distracted with its regeneration. However, he isn't capable of carrying both people at the same time, so he makes the tough decision to save Miria and leave the other guy behind, knowing damn well that he's going to become dragon food sooner or later. He manages to get Miria a good distance away, but her HP is still going down due to all her blood loss, so she won't survive much longer in this condition. Elusia wishes he could use healing magic to help her, but he doesn't have any skills of that nature, nor does he have a medical degree, so his best bet is to take her to a human settlement so they can treat her there. He smells the scent of humans coming from this direction, so he grabs Miria and starts carrying her over there. But along the way, he smells something very concerning. It's the scent of dozens of gray wolves closing in on him, and they are likely after Miria's body. He is eventually surrounded with nowhere left to run, so he is forced to put Miria down and face the wolves. A little while later, Miria regains consciousness briefly and catches a glimpse of Elusia fighting to keep her safe, but she is still too weak to move, so she passes out again soon after. Late into the night, Elusia is still carrying Miria, and his body is on the verge of giving out, but his efforts have finally paid off as he has finally made it to the human village. He starts yelling for someone to come out and save Miria, but he's still a dragon, so all the people hear is a monster roaring late at night, and when they come out to check what's going on, they find the monster carrying Miria's unconscious body. They immediately assume that Elusia is a threat and attack him, and no matter how much he tries to explain, they can't understand a word he is saying, so there's no point. He eventually realizes that there's nothing he can do to convince the human that he is not a threat, so he just sets Miria down and runs back into the forest to avoid causing any more trouble. Sometime later, Miria wakes up in bed and finds Mariel sitting next to her. She explains that Miria was badly injured, so she had to use a lot of white magic to heal her. She informs Miria that she was unconscious for around 2 days, and Miria doesn't remember much from the incident, so she assumes someone must have carried her back to the village. Mariel goes on to talk about how reckless it was for her to go wandering into the forest with only Duz and Gantz, and speaking of those two, Miria asks what happened to them. But Mariel doesn't have any good news to share. After they found Miria, they went searching for the others and discovered Gantz's dead body in the forest. As for Duz, they never found his body, but they did find a large splotch of blood on the ground near a tree, so it's safe to assume that he may have been eaten by a monster out there. Miria breaks down in tears at the realization that her friends are gone, and she blames herself for not stopping Duz from going on that expedition. Mariel tries to make her feel better by telling her Daz was always a hot-headed fool who couldn't listen to warnings, but Miria tells her she's wrong. Daz may have been rash, but he was a good guy, and he was always the first one to fight off monsters that threatened the village, so the children adored him. However, he valued his pride as a warrior a little too much, because one night, while at the bar, some random guy told him he wouldn't be able to defeat a rock dragon no matter how hard he tried, and he happened to take that personal because the next day, he decided that he was going to go out and defeat the rock dragon with Gantz. Miria tried to tell him it was a bad idea, but he was already dead set on his plan, so she ended up tagging along because she wanted to make sure he would come back alive, but that didn't work out so well. Mariel says it was Duz's own pride that got him killed, so Maria needs to make sure she never makes the same mistake. But that aside, she tells Miria that she did a good job making it back here on her own despite how bad her injuries were. Miria is surprised to hear Mariel say she got back on her own because she is sure that she was unconscious the entire time. Mariel has no idea what she's talking about because she assumed Miria walked back to the village, at which point she was seen being attacked by a baby dragon. But she explains that she was knocked unconscious by the rock dragon deep in the forest, so there's no way she could have made it back on her own. She starts wondering if she might be misremembering the sequence of events, but just then, she recalls seeing Iluzia fighting off the wolves, and she thinks he might have been the one who saved her. But she has no way of knowing since no one got a good look at the monster before it ran back into the woods. Meanwhile, Iluzia has just woken up from a nap, and it looks like all his wounds have finally healed. He already knew that resting would help him recover, but he thinks it's crazy that he can heal from almost anything just by taking a nap. If he had been reborn as a human, it would probably take him a lot longer to heal. But speaking of healing, he wonders if Miria is doing all right now. He can't exactly go to the village to check on her since the villagers would attack him in sight, so he has no way of knowing if she managed to survive or not. He had thought he was stronger simply because he leveled up, but in reality, he is still just as powerful as he was when he was an egg. If he had been stronger, things might have turned out differently when he faced the dragon, and he may have been able to save the other guy as well. But there's no use dwelling on the past now, so he simply needs to focus on growing stronger from now on. Later that day, Iluzia tracks down a colony of dark worms and prepares to use them as his personal XP farm. He begins a complete genocide on the entire dark worm colony, and by the time he is done, not a single worm is left alive, and he has officially risen to level 25, meaning he can finally evolve again. He immediately goes to sit by the lake to get comfortable and asks the system to begin the evolution process. He is then asked to choose between 5 different evolution choices. They are all some variation of small dragon, and then there's the plague dragon, but Iluzia doesn't really want to use that one. He had no idea what the difference is between any of them, so he asks the system for a little help, and it begins explaining what the difference in titles mean. With little dragons, they become strong very quickly, but they have a lower level cap, so they don't have much potential for growth in their later years. As for kid dragons, they are basically just more advanced versions of baby dragons, but they still retain the high growth potential of baby dragons, while mini dragons are kind of in between, with fewer potential evolutions, but a stable evolution tree. From the explanation he just got, Iluzia thinks he should go with one of the kid dragon variants, but before he makes his choice, he asks for a detailed description of what each one can do. The system explains that mini dragons are a species with slow individual development and limited evolution choices, but good future prospects, and that sounds nice. But Iluzia isn't a fan of the whole slow early development thing. Next is the mini angel dragon, and it is basically a protective spirit that swears to live for the sake of others. It can use strong healing magic, and that does sound appealing to Iluzia since he remembers how Miria used her healing magic and it would be useful to have. But the mini angel dragon also has extremely limited combat potential, so it wouldn't be very useful in a fight, and he needs something that can survive this harsh forest. The next option is the kid dragon, and the system informs him that it is pretty much the same as his baby dragon form, but with all the stats greatly increased. Likewise with the kid marble dragon, but the main difference there is that it possesses a mutation that gives it a polka dot pattern and a high affinity with magic. Iluzia is leading toward the kid marble dragon on this one since the idea of strong magic sounds really good to him, but then the system goes on to explain the details regarding the young plague dragon. It is the first stage of an evil dragon that spreads disaster, but Iluzia stops the system right there because he doesn't want to be an evil dragon at all. People are already wary enough around him as it is, so if he becomes something with spreading disaster in its description, he's never going to make any friends. But just then, the system mentions that the plague dragon possesses the ability to transform into a human, and hearing that immediately gets him to reconsider his choice. If he can take on a human form, then he will finally be able to talk to other people and make friends, and even if it means he has to become an evil dragon, it might be worth it. He kind of feels like he's going to regret this later, but he's never going to get to spend time with Miria unless he unlocks a human transformation. And being a plague dragon doesn't necessarily mean he has to go around spreading plagues, so he promises to be a good, honest plague dragon. Iluzia then undergoes the evolution process, but he's starting to regret it a little since he looks pretty scary now. On the bright side, the system informs him that he's got a lot of new skills with the new form, so he's excited to test them out. The system tells him that he has unlocked the power of flight and venom fangs, as well as the skill of disease, breath, and paralysis, but he's not too happy about those. He also received the title of Walking Calamity and Wrongdoer, so Illusia is starting to wonder if this was really a good decision after all. And to make it worse, he didn't even receive the human transformation that the system told him about. He starts panicking because the whole reason for this transformation was so he could become a human, but the system refuses to explain how he's supposed to do that, so he's pretty much screwed. He lies by the lake in despair for a while, but there's no point in staying upset about the situation forever, so he decides to make the most of what he's got and starts checking out his skills. He is also curious about where the divine system voice is coming from, but the system refuses to answer questions like that, so he changed topics and asks about one of his skills called Dragon Scale Power. The system explains that by flapping his wings, Illusia can create a deadly miasma that will negatively affect anything in the area, and at max level, it would be strong enough to wipe out an entire nation. Illusia really doesn't like the sound of that, so he decides to give the power a little test, and sure enough, as soon as he opens his wings, a flower nearby instantly wilts. He's pissed because this skill basically makes him a walking bioweapon, and no human would want to get close to him like this. The system then goes on to explain Illusia's second skill, Disease Breath, and it is basically what you would expect. Getting hit with that breath will give you a random disease anywhere from COVID to cancer, so it is capable of wiping out entire civilizations. This really isn't going to help Illusia's goal of becoming a good guy, but there's at least some hope left because he earned a title called the Itty Bitty Hero back when he saved Miria. The system explains that the title is earned by showing modest courage and kindness towards another, and it could one day lead to earning the full hero status, which comes with a significant damage boost. He hopes that if he levels this title up, then he will be able to avoid becoming an evil dragon, but he's still got other titles to worry about. The title of Wrongdoer is earned by leaving a mountain of corpses in your wake, which Illusia kind of deserves after what he did to those wolves. This title slightly increases damage from dark attribute attacks, but it also makes learning healing spells harder, and Illusia throws a tantrum after hearing that because he really wanted to learn some healing magic. Meanwhile, over in the human village, Miria is currently helping Marielle perform maintenance on the wards that are placed all around the village. These wards basically broadcast a message that subconsciously causes monsters to stay away from this area, but it isn't perfect since any monster with a particularly strong will could make it through if it had a goal in mind. Miria asks Marielle if that means the monster they mentioned came here intentionally, but she has no way of knowing since she wasn't there at the time. Miria still has memories of Illusia defending her, so she can't shake the feeling that he is trying to help, but she's still not sure. Marielle wants to check all the wards around the village to make sure there's nothing wrong with them, but Miria can't get Illusia off her mind. So she asks Mariella if it's possible for a monster to want to save a human. Marielle is starting to worry that Miria might be developing furry tendencies based on how much she talks about monsters now, but she denies it and says she's just curious and wanted to learn more about monsters. Marielle sees no harm in explaining things, so she informs Miria that monsters are able to evolve into different forms after meeting a level requirement. They can level up by hunting other monsters, and they grow more and more powerful with each evolution. Miria is fascinated by the story, but she wonders how the people of the past managed to figure out the way monster evolutions work. Marielle explains that from time to time, there are special people who can hear something called the Divine Voice. This voice provides information on monsters, levels, and titles, such as heroes and saints. It is thanks to the Divine Voice that humanity knows so much about the evolution process, and even if the monster really did save Miria, Marielle is certain that the next time she sees it, it would have evolved into a more terrifying and ferocious form, ready to kill her on sight. Miria doesn't think that's true, but Marielle tells her that monsters usually operate on instinct alone, so they will do anything to gain power, and that makes them incompatible as companions. Meanwhile, out in the forest, Illusia has finally come to terms with his new form as a plague dragon, and he plans to level up his hero traits so he won't end up as a demon king at some point. He also wants to learn the conditions necessary for that human transformation, so he can finally go to that human village and see Miria, and the first step in that plan is leveling up, so he starts looking for any weak monsters nearby that he can farm. However, as he is walking through the forest, he slowly begins to realize that something is slowing down his movement. He then looks up and finds a giant spider web right above his head, and a moment later, the spider descends to attack him. The spider is actually pretty strong, so Illusia isn't sure he's going to be able to beat it. But when the spider tries to hit him with one of its webs, Illusia uses his fire breath to defend himself, and it was apparently really effective. He is a little more confident about his chances of winning now that he knows the spider is weak to fire, but it's still got a lot of HP for him to get through, so he's going to have to try something else. He slashes at the spider with his claws and uses his paralysis ability at the same time, but even after attacking it for a while, the spider has only lost half of its health, and it's pissed. At this rate, Illusia won't be able to beat it in his current state, so he decides to make a run for it, but the spider begins chasing after him. He tries to escape using his fly skill, but for some reason, it doesn't work, so he's stuck on the ground for now. 10 minutes later, the spider is still chasing him, and it must really be committed to taking Illusia out because it hasn't even slowed down for even a second. Since Illusia has been doing a lot of rolling, his roll skill goes up from level 2 to 3, and that means he's able to go a lot faster by outpacing the spider, but doing so also earns him the title of Chicken Runner. Illusia is fine with being called a coward if it means he lives to fight another day, but he suddenly realizes that he is heading right for a massive cliff, and a fall like that means certain doom for him. He considers turning to the right, but then the spider would keep chasing him, so his best bet is to make it to the other side of the ravine. He still doesn't understand how his fly skill is supposed to work, but as long as he's able to gain enough height with his jump, he can ride the air currents with his wings and glide all the way to safety. However, just when Illusia thought he was finally safe, he looks back and discovers that the spider built a web bridge to cross the ravine, so it's still hot on his trail. As Illusia continues running, his roll skill goes up to level 4, and that's nice and all, but it doesn't really help his current situation. Along the way, Illusia happens to come across a gray wolf, and since he's going too fast to stop, he ends up running it over, earning himself a few extra expertise points and raising his plague dragon level from 1 to 3. The same thing keeps happening with monsters all over the forest, and every time Illusia runs them over, his level increases, so before long, he has reached level 8. With how much his stats have increased, Illusia thinks he might be able to beat the spider now, so he stops running and prepares for a fight. He's still not sure what skills it has, so he asks the system to do a quick scan, and it's pretty much what you would expect from a spider: silk web, paralysis, venom, and something called double poison. Illusia isn't sure what double poison is supposed to do, but he doesn't think it's going to be a problem. He's confident that if he can get close enough, he can take the spider out with another fire blast. However, he probably should have been more careful with his approach, because the spider activates its double poison ability, releasing a cloud of poisonous gas. Illusia is still able to move since he has a little poison resistance, but the spider doesn't know that, so it is just sitting there, expecting Illusia to pass out from the poison eventually. Illusia decides to take advantage of this and pretends that the poison is working on him just so he can lure the spider in, and as soon as it is close enough, he hits it with a huge blast of fire, burning it to a crisp. As a result of his victory, Illusia's level goes all the way up to 14, but he still doesn't have access to the human transformation yet, and he's not sure what he's supposed to do. After complaining for a while, Illusia kills a wolf for dinner tonight and prepares to find a tree to spend the night, but that's when he notices a cave opening nearby. The cave looks like it's empty, so he thinks it will be perfect as his new base, and he moves in right away. By nightfall, he prepares the wolf meat and starts roasting it over a fire, but he recalls that he found a few herbs in the forest earlier today, so he adds them to the meat, and they surprisingly taste a lot like pepper. He loves it because this is his first taste of actual spice since he got to this world, and he ends up earning the title of Mr. Chef as a result. He starts to wonder if he can win people over with his cooking skills, but he knows that would never work. After all, who would trust food served by a plague dragon? His best chance at earning their trust would have been while he was still a cute baby dragon, but with how he looks now, he doubts Miria would even recognize him. Speaking of Miria, we find her at a bar in the village, and she just heard a rumor that Duz was spotted somewhere in the forest. The old man says he was out fishing when he saw Duz walking nearby, but he looked kind of like a zombie, and he wouldn't respond to his voice. So the man did the smart thing and stayed the fuck away instead of investigating. Miria freezes up when she hears this, because even if it sounds suspicious, she still feels partially responsible for not being able to save Duz and Gantz, so she wants to go check it out. Marielle immediately shuts that down because she knows how bad situations like this can go, but she can see that Miria is really bothered by this, so she agrees to contact the Adventurers Guild and have them send some adventurers to check it out for them. The next morning, in the forest, Illusia wakes up early and is prepared for another day of aggressive XP farming, but all of a sudden, he spots a moving puddle on the floor. He assumes it must be a weak monster, so he tries to scan its stats, but when he does so, the system starts glitching out because his level isn't high enough to comprehend that thing's abilities. The slime attempts to attack Illusia, but he manages to run away at the last second. After making it a good distance away, he finally takes a break, and he still has no idea what that thing was, but it doesn't take a genius to figure out that he probably shouldn't mess with it if he values being alive. He decides to search for prey in a different section of the forest for today, and as he is wandering around, he ends up coming across a little pot next to a tree. He thinks this is a lovely find since he might be able to use it to store fruits for later, but the second he touches the pot, it comes to life and attacks him. The Poltergeist is a D-rank monster, so Illusia tries to take it out with a fire punch, but unfortunately, that punch did almost nothing in terms of damage, so Illusia starts spamming attacks in hopes of whittling down its health over time. He does manage to reduce the pot's health by a lot, but just when he thought he had won, the pot heals itself, completely restoring all its lost HP. Illusia is starting to get really frustrated, so as a last-ditch effort, he grabs the pot and decides to throw it off a cliff to finish it off since there's no way it can swim. This was apparently very effective, since a moment later, Illusia receives some XP for defeating the pot monster. Unfortunately, it looks like the other pots in the area weren't a fan of how Illusia treated their buddy a moment ago, so they all combine themselves to form the lamest-looking fusion Illusia has ever seen. The pots seem to think they are making themselves look more intimidating by doing this, but in reality, they are just making it easier for Illusia to smash them. So he takes advantage of the opportunity, and a few moments later, he has gained over 500 experience points and reached level 30. His stats also went up by a huge chunk, but unfortunately, he didn't get any usable pots after the whole ordeal since the pots all shattered the second he defeated them. He would really like to find something to store all his fruits and veggies in sooner or later, and just as he is thinking this, he happens to hear something walking by. The system informs him that the creature he is looking at is a clay bear. It's D-rank, just like Illusia, so he thinks he stands a decent chance at beating it. And more importantly, if it is really made entirely of clay, then after defeating it, he can use the leftover clay to make a pot for himself. He might even be able to create some furniture for his little cave, so this is an opportunity he can't pass up. He starts sneaking up alongside the bear while keeping his presence hidden, and once he has successfully claimed the high ground, he completely gives up his stealth advantage by yelling as he jumps down to attack the bear. The bear hears all the yelling and turns around to figure out what it is, at which point, it spots Illusia heading straight for it. But instead of panicking, it just opens a giant mouth on its stomach and Illusia freaks out the moment he sees this. He knows the monster is made out of clay, but if it's called a clay bear, then it should at least be a little more bear-like. The bear lunges at Illusia, so he starts running away while taking pop shots at it, and surprisingly, he manages to do a fair bit of damage to the bear, but unfortunately, the bear has a special ability to handle situations like this, so in the next moment, it completely heals all its injuries. This is really bad for Illusia, since if this thing can regenerate, then that means he needs to take it out in one shot, but at his current level, he doesn't have any moves that are strong enough to one-shot this thing. The best he can think of is picking the bear up and dropping it like he did to the pots, but there's no way he could carry something as big as that, so he decides to maintain his hit and run strategy and just hope the bear runs out of mana to regenerate itself eventually. However, just when Illusia's plan was going smoothly, all of a sudden, the bear forms a tornado around itself, and by the time the dust dissipates, it has taken on a new form with spikes all over its body. Illusia doesn't think this is fair, because how is he supposed to hit the bear with his roll attacks now when it's got thorns? He won't be able to slowly drain the bear's HP anymore, but on the bright side, it looks like the transformation drained a lot of its mana, so it won't be able to heal itself as often as before. The bear breaks off one of its spikes and hurls it at Illusia, which he managed to dodge in time, but then he notices that the spike started losing its shape once it was no longer connected to the clay bear, and that gives him an idea. He runs over to the bear, and when the time is just right, he twists off one of the bear's arms and starts molding it into a little ball. He then jumps into the air with that ball and prepares to strike the bear with as much force as he can muster, completely destroying it in one go. As a result, he receives a ton of experience points and goes up to level 33 in no time. He also unlocks a new skill called the Nutcracker as a result, which doesn't sound very cool to him, but it is accurate. And to top things off, he finally has the clay he needs, so he's ready to head back home and start making some stuff. Before long, he has finished forming his first clay bowl, so he creates a makeshift kiln and puts it in there to bake for a little while. In the meantime, he plans to go get himself some food, so he heads out into the forest and begins foraging for some plants. He finds a few mushrooms near the trees, and the system informs him that these things are lightning mushrooms. They aren't able to bear any fruit and tend to leach nutrition from other nearby plants, but those stolen nutrients make it very delicious. That said, it does have a slight paralysis effect, so he needs to be careful about that. Illusia knows he doesn't have resistance to paralysis, so he decides to skip the mushrooms this time around. He continues searching for some good plants to eat, and he ends up coming across an interesting pink one, but it turns out to be a carnivorous flower, so he chops it down in an instant. The system informs him that the carnivorous flower is a rare plant that can eat animals, However, it can digest salt, so most of it gets stored in the white pouch at the plant's base. This is really good news for Aluja since this means he can finally use some salt in his meal prep, even if the salt source may be a little gross. Meanwhile, over in the human village, Miria is disobeying Mariel's orders and heading out into the forest despite the danger because she believes Dawes might still be alive, and if that's the case, she wants to find him. She has no guarantee that what the old man said was true, or if it was really Dawes, but she feels so guilty about not stopping those two from going into the forest by themselves and facing dangers they were not ready for. That's exactly why she decided to go into the forest by herself, where she will likely face dangers she's not ready for. But what's the worst that could happen? Back on Aluja's end, he finds another set of mushrooms, and these ones can apparently walk and attack once they reach full maturity. But until then, they are just a bunch of regular mushrooms growing out of the ground, and that makes them perfect for Aluja's dinner. He also spots another group of mushrooms nearby, and these ones apparently have an A-rank value. The system informs him that it is insanely valuable, so if cultivated properly, they can earn you a fortune. And Aluja is excited to hear all this. But when he asks the system to tell him what the mushrooms actually do, the system explains that the mushrooms are used to make drugs, and Aluja immediately burns all of them to the ground because he's not trying to become a drug dealer. While that's going on, Miria is still making her way through the forest, and she's forced to hide from all kinds of monsters because she has no way of fighting them on her own, yet she is still pressing forward. As for Aluja, he is still out foraging for food, and he happens to come across some berries growing along a tree. The berries are B-rank value spice that is highly sought after among nobility, and it's worth so much that it's basically the saffron of this world. Aluja had no idea the fruit in this forest could be so valuable, but since he's got a steady supply, he's eager to go home and try it with dinner tonight. Miria is still on her way into the forest, and she's starting to get second thoughts about this because going any further into the forest would be a little too dangerous. After all, you never know what kind of terrifying monster may be lurking deep in those woods, waiting to devour her. Meanwhile, the terrifying monster in question is busy geeking out over his massive haul of berries. Miria decides that it might be safer to take a look around the outskirts of the forest before risking her life by going too deep, which is probably a good idea. Later that night, Aluja sets up some glow mushrooms in his cave for some natural lighting, and his clay bowls are finally done baking, so he can finally use them to cook. He picks up all the ingredients he gathered throughout the day and throws them in the pot to make himself some stew, and he is really glad he found that salt earlier because it makes the food taste so much better. This is the first real meal he has had ever since coming to this world, and while his cooking skills may still need some work, this is the first time he has gotten to feel like a normal person in a while. He's still got a bunch of clay left over, so he plans to make a few cups as well, and maybe even decorate the inside of the cave a little. The next morning, we see a carriage passing through the area with two passengers, and they turn out to be the adventurers who were sent by the guild to investigate the strange monster activity that has been going on in this forest recently. Later that day, Aluja returns to his cave after a successful hunt, and we see that he has been quite busy with his craft since his room is filled with all kinds of pottery now. He has also begun butchering wolves and collecting their pelts so he can make proper clothes later. He has gotten pretty used to living in this world by now, and he's even started preserving food so he doesn't have to worry about hunting every single day. Unfortunately, he hasn't figured out how to keep the random creatures from eating it all while he's not looking, but he's got an idea now. He plans to make a special batch of jerky loaded with every single poisonous plant he can find, so all those monkeys will think twice the next time they touch his food. He goes out looking for any poisonous ingredients he can find, and he ends up wandering into a field of colorful flowers as a result, but while out in the flower field, he runs into a monster he has never seen before. The system tells him this monster is called the Venom Princess, and it possesses a myriad of poison-related skills, so Aluja stays on guard around it. Unfortunately, the lizard managed to distract him long enough to sneak up behind Aluja and bite him in the shoulder, and even though Aluja has some poison resistance, the Venom Princess's poison is no joke, so before long he passes out on the floor from all the pain. This poison is a lot stronger than anything Aluja has ever experienced before, so even with his poison resistance, he's going to be a goner in no time if he doesn't figure out a way to deal with this. He hasn't found any antidote plants of any kind around here, so he looks over to the Venom Princess and hopes the system can give him some useful information on it so he can cure the poison before it's too late. According to the system, the Venom Princess is the type of monster which hunts by poisoning its target and then waiting for them to die before feasting on their carcass. The princess's poison comes as a byproduct of the many poisonous plants that they consume on a regular basis, but as a result, their body also naturally produces an anti-venom. This means that if Aluja manages to capture the Venom Princess, he can get the antidote from its body. But figuring out how to catch it isn't going to be easy. Illusia can still move a little thanks to his poison resistance. He suspects the Venom Princess is hiding nearby, waiting for the poison to finish him off. Realizing this, Illusia decides to make it look like he's running away. If the princess thinks its meal is escaping, it won't want to miss the chance and will give chase. That's when Illusia plans to use his roll ability to outpace it, turn the tables, and catch it off guard. But unfortunately, it turns out that the Venom Princess is also capable of using the roll ability, so there goes the outpacing idea. But Illusia quickly comes up with another plan and decides to lead the Venom Princess over to that cliff from before so he can surprise it. He continues dashing his way through the forest, but as he is rolling, a spike suddenly trips him up, and that's when Illusia finds out that the Venom Princess is capable of using other skills while in the middle of a roll, and he doesn't think it's fair since he can't do that. But he's got no choice but to deal with it until he can complete his plan. A few moments later, Illusia managed to lure the Venom Princess over to the cliff and knock it out of its roll, but while he's proud of himself for executing such a flawless plan, he soon realizes that there's one major flaw. If the Venom Princess falls to the bottom of the ravine, he won't be able to get any of the antidote in its body, meaning he would die. He can't let that happen, so he dies down after the Venom Princess. But just when he thought things couldn't get any worse, he suddenly feels the poison taking effect on his body, and his vision is starting to blur. He pushes past the pain and manages to reach the Venom Princess just in time to use his fire breath to launch both of them back out of the ravine and onto land, but while he's technically safe. The poison's effects are still very much active in his body, so soon after, Illusia ends up passing out. Meanwhile, on Miria's end, she spent all day searching the outskirts of the forest for Daz, but she couldn't find any trace of him, and as she is returning to the village, she hears the voice of Marielle calling out to her, so she walks out of the bushes and acts as if nothing happened. Marielle is relieved to have finally found Miria since she was starting to worry that Miria might have done something dumb and wandered into the forest all on her own. Earlier, she realized that she hadn't heard from Miria in a while, so she went to her house to check in on her, but she wasn't there, so Marielle decided to try searching the entire village. She's just glad that Miria is safe, but she asks Miria if she's sure she didn't go into the forest by any chance. Miria completely denies entering the forest, which is a bald-faced lie, but Marielle has no way of knowing that for sure, so she just accepts it. She then informs Miria that she received a letter from the guild telling her that some adventurers have already been dispatched to the forest as requested. So she assures Miria that there's no need to worry about searching for Daz since the professionals will handle it. Meanwhile, back in the forest, Illusia finally wakes up from his coma, and he's surprised that he's still alive despite all the damage that poison from the Venom Princess did to him. But a moment later, he realizes that the Venom Princess is still standing right next to him. He jolts up out of fear because he thinks the Venom Princess is still trying to eat him, but he eventually realizes that the Venom Princess doesn't seem to be holding any hostile intent. In fact, it's almost like it saved him. He asks the Venom Princess if it gave him the antidote to the poison while he was unconscious, and when it is confirmed, he thanks the Venom Princess for its help. It did try to kill him earlier, but Illusia has killed his fair share of monsters in this forest, so he can't really complain. He is just glad that he finally has a companion to spend time with, so he doesn't have to talk to himself all the time. Later that night, Illusia takes the Venom Princess back home with him and prepares a meal using some of the ingredients he managed to gather earlier today. The Venom Princess really seems to enjoy the food, and Illusia is glad to finally have someone to share a meal with, so he tells the Venom Princess that it's free to stay here for as long as it likes. Just then, the Venom Princess notices an ominous-looking barrel over there, and Illusia explains that it's a batch of poison he made in his own. But as soon as the Venom Princess heard that, it immediately starts drinking the poison. At first, Illusia is really worried, but then he remembers that the Venom Princess is immune to most poisons, so it's not causing any real harm. Against his better judgment, Illusia decides to try a little taste of the poison to figure out what it tasted like to the Venom Princess. But he quickly learned the hard way that tasting poison isn't a good idea. The next day, Illusia proceeds to go hunting with the Venom Princess, and they are bonding a lot because their teamwork has been absolutely flawless so far, and they really seem to be getting along well with one another. The following day, Illusia takes the Venom Princess out to go pick some spicy berries, but it turns out that the princess doesn't like spice as much as Illusia does, so she runs off to find something else to eat. Illusia follows along, but to his horror, he finds the princess next to a grotesque-looking mushroom. The mushroom contains a deadly poison, which is probably why she wants to eat it, but it also smells like a decomposing body, and Illusia does not want to have to deal with that smell all day. So he burns the mushroom to a crisp, leaving the princess very upset. He apologizes and promises to find something else poisonous for her to eat, But all of a sudden, the princess forms a clay spike. At first, Illusia thinks she must still be angry at him, but that's not the case. She actually noticed something stalking them from behind the bushes, so she attacks it, and a two-headed dog monster soon emerges. Illusia has never seen anything like it before, but he gets the feeling that this isn't something he can handle easily, so he asks the system to scan its stats. It turns out that the monster is level 39, and not only does it have overpowered stats, but it also has a myriad of skills, including gravity manipulation. Illusia honestly isn't sure if he would be able to win a fight against this thing, so he's starting to sweat a little. He considers running away for a moment, but then he notices that the monster has some tracking skills as well, so his chances of escaping as things are now are pretty slim. That means he has no other choice but to fight, and fortunately, he's got the Venom Princess by his side, so their attack strategy is pretty simple. Illusia will draw the monster's attention from the front while the Venom Princess will wait for an opening to hit it with her poison. It's a good plan, but Illusia kind of underestimated how tough it would be to actually land a two-headed wolf, because as he tries to throw a punch at the blue head, the red head knocks him to the floor. The blue head then starts casting a spell which traps Illusia in a gravity field. He is in serious trouble here because he can barely move now. But fortunately, Illusia still has the Venom Princess on his side, so she uses a clay bullet to disrupt the blue dog's spell, dispelling the gravity field and allowing Illusia to move again. He takes this opportunity and unleashes a torrent of dragon's breath upon the monster, setting it ablaze and causing a ton of damage. But just as he was celebrating his successful attack, the flames part, and Illusia sees the monster healing itself mid-fight, which again, doesn't seem fair to him. Just then, the blue head begins casting another spell, but this one looks like it's even more powerful than the last one, so Illusia doesn't want to wait to find out what it does. He rushes straight forward to attack, and just like last time, the redhead intercepts him, but Illusia already expected this. After all, it doesn't matter if he gets bitten as long as he can stop that spell, and he just so happens to be within range to punch the snot out of the blue head, which is exactly what he does. This also creates enough of an opening for the Venom Princess to jump down from one of the trees and poison the wolf, and now that the wolf has been poisoned, Illusia thinks the battle is pretty much over. The wolf attempts to heal himself, but the damage done by the poison is outpacing the health regen, so it's only a matter of time before the wolf dies. However, just when it looked like this would be the end, the red head of the wolf took a drastic measure and bit off the blue head in order to stop the poison from spreading. Illusia is shocked because he didn't even know that was possible, but at least with the blue head gone, it shouldn't be able to use gravity magic anymore. But unfortunately, it has something even worse now. The wolf has an ability called Sacrifice, which means if one of its heads is severed, it comes back as a vengeful ghost head, and since the Venom Princess's poison is pretty much what killed it, it goes straight after her. Illusia tries to protect the princess, but the wolf gets in his way, so he has to deal with this thing first. He launches it into the air, and as it is falling down, Illusia grabs its head and cracks it against the ground as hard as he can. He then rushed off to find the Venom Princess and prays that she's still alive because she's the first and only friend he has managed to make ever since coming to this world, so he doesn't know what he will do if anything bad happens to her. He eventually comes across a pool of blood on the floor, and his heart sinks as he realizes that the blood belongs to the Venom Princess. He starts calling out to her in hopes that she's still nearby, and just when he was about to lose hope, he hears her respond from underneath a few bushes nearby. She is badly wounded, but still alive, and that's all that matters to Illusia right now. Just then, the wolf head comes flying around the corner in an attempt to finish the Venom Princess off, but there's absolutely no way Illusia is letting that happen on his watch, so he punches the head until it's reduced to a bloody mess, and then he cradles the Venom Princess in his hand so he can take her home. He is so relieved that he managed to save her in time, and he thinks to himself that as long as he has her by his side, then he doesn't care about that human transformation anymore. But just then, the system informs him he has leveled up enough to unlock his human transformation, and honestly, Illusia wasn't expecting that. Meanwhile, back at the human village, Marielle shows Miria an old book about monsters since she has been so interested in them lately. The book contains info on all sorts of creatures that lurk in the forest, from the dark worms, which are F-rank monsters so weak that even a healer like Miria could take them out with no problem, but when you go up to D-rank monsters, they become a lot more dangerous. The book's records go all the way up to B-rank monsters, and those are said to be so powerful that only heroes are capable of taking them, so any normal human would stand no chance. And just below them are C-rank monsters. An example is the C-rank rock dragon, which can technically be defeated with a really well-coordinated attack, but it could still easily kill a normal person. which is why Marielle is always so serious when she tells people not to go wandering into the forest. Just then, Marielle hears a few footsteps approaching the front door, and it looks like the adventurers that were sent by the guild have finally arrived. On the way to the village, Yuno asks Meltia if she's sure it was a good idea to accept a C-rank mission even though it's just the two of them right now. Meltia agrees that C-rank missions are pretty difficult, but she thinks it's more convenient like this, because if things get dangerous, she can just ditch Yuno and run for it. Yuno gets really upset that Meltia would really abandon her, but she says she was just joking, and she doesn't actually intend to do much fighting to begin with. This may be a C-rank mission, but their objective is to just search the forest, so they don't necessarily have to kill any monsters. They eventually arrive at Marielle's house and head inside to greet her. Marielle gives them the details of the mission and explains that a man named Dawes recently went missing in the forest after fighting a rock dragon, and Miria feels responsible for the situation, so Marielle suspects that she has been sneaking out into the forest to search for him, believing he's still alive. To put a stop to it before Miria ends up getting herself hurt, Marielle wants Meltia and Yuno to go into the forest and look for evidence of Dawes' death. Ideally, it would be best if they found his body, but worst case scenario, they could just search the forest for a couple of days and come back to report that they didn't find any evidence that Dawes was alive. Meanwhile, in the forest, Aluzi wraps Princess in a bunch of herbs to help her wounds heal quickly, and while she's resting, he decides to head out because he's excited to finally try out his human transformation skill. He does think it's a little ironic that he gained the ability as soon as he decided he didn't need it, but he's not going to turn down the opportunity to interact with humans. Though, he's a little worried that he might end up turning into a cute girl, since that's how transformations usually end up, but he will cross that bridge when he comes to it. He activates the human transformation ability, but as his body morphs, instead of getting a real human body, he just gets a slightly taller dragon body that's extremely chopped looking. And on top of being ugly, their form also cuts his attack power and HP in half while simultaneously eating up his MP to maintain the form. It's completely useless as far as Aluja is concerned, and he feels like he was scammed by the system once again, so he returns to his full dragon form and just lies there in defeat. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the forest, both Meltia and Yuno have just managed to defeat a spider monster together, but it took a lot of the wind out of their sails, so they are running low on energy now. They continue searching through the forest, but it has gotten pretty dark now, and the monsters in the area are getting stronger the deeper they go. Yuno really doubts that any human would be able to survive out here in conditions like this, so she thinks it's pointless to keep searching for Dawes, but a moment later, they come across Aluja's cave, and no matter how they look at it, the statues outside the cave look like they were man-made. Yuno suggests that it may have been made by some dragon worshippers, but Meltia doesn't think the people in the village seem like the kind to have that type of religion, so there's definitely something going on here. Just then, Yuno smells something good near the entrance, and after looking around for a bit, she spots the meat that Aluzia had hung up on the tree. And this leads Meltia to believe that there must be a human nearby, so she decides to investigate the cave for any other oddities. Upon entering the cave, Meltia's suspicions are confirmed as they find all sorts of lights, fur, and stored fruit in the room. Yuno notices that one pot in particular holds a fruit known as red gold because it is so valuable that most people never even get to see it in person, and Yuno is tempted to take some for herself. But Meltia stops her because doing so might get them in trouble. Someone clearly lives here, and as far as they know, this place could be a hideout for thieves, so Meltia would rather not get mixed up in shady business. Just then, Princess wakes up from her nap, and she immediately turns hostile to the two random humans who walked into Aluja's home. She is about to attack them, but at the last second, she stops and turns to leave the cave. Meltia and Yuno have no idea why the Venom Princess decided to leave them alone, but they are both relieved because a single bite from that thing would have been an instant death sentence for them. Meltia suggests they should get out of the cave before the princess decides to come back, but unbeknownst to her, outside the cave, Aluja is currently pacing back and forth, wondering how to handle this first interaction with humans. He saw them enter the cave a few minutes ago, so he sent a message to Princess to make sure she wouldn't harm them. From what he saw, one looks like a female knight while the other is a dog-type demi-human, and he's hoping that they are impressed by how much he has decorated his interiors, so he will have something to talk about. However, a moment later, he remembers that he's still a dragon, and they will probably be terrified the moment they see him, assuming he's a monster there to attack. So he comes up with an idea and decides to use the human transformation. After all, since demi-humans exist in this world, there's a chance that they might accept him as a really ugly-looking lizard person. He eventually activates the transformation and approaches the girls, but immediately after saying hi to them, Both Yuno and Meltia get absolutely terrified. So Yuno knocks him down with her mallet, and Meltia hits him with the sword skill. Illusia is still mostly unharmed since he's a little stronger than the two of them, and as soon as Meltia realizes that they stand no chance against him, she tells Yuno they need to make a run for it, leaving Illusia disheartened over his failed attempt to socialize. A few minutes later, Meltia and Yuno finally stop running, and they are relieved that Illusia isn't chasing after them, but they aren't sure what to do now. Yuno suggests they should head back to the village and report what happened, but Meltia doesn't think that's a good idea since if they return now, they will have virtually nothing to report related to their mission. So for now, she decides to call the remaining members of the party for help since they will need more manpower if they want to go any deeper into the forest. The next morning, Illusia wakes up after a good night's sleep and grabs some of the meat he hung up in the trees for breakfast. He is still a little bummed out about how things played out yesterday, but he knows exactly how to cheer himself up. He recalls how those stupid forest monkeys kept stealing all of his meat, so he goes up to Princess and asks her for a little favor. He says he wants her to poison a batch of the meat he prepares so when those monkeys try to steal it, they'll end up dead. Princess is a little surprised by Illusia's request, but she agrees to do it anyway, and a few moments later, a batch of colorless and odorless poison is produced. Illusia is impressed because if he didn't know better, he would think this was a bowl of water, and Princess is really proud of herself. Afterward, Illusia douses a bunch of meat in the poison and hangs them out before waiting for the monkeys to take the bait, and soon enough, they fall for it. One of the monkeys has already passed out from the poison and is writhing in pain on the ground, while the other three look really confused. Illusia then takes the opportunity to jump out and knock the other monkeys to the ground as payback for all the times they stole his meat. However, the monkeys refused to go down without a fight, so they all surrounded Illusia and prepared to launch a coordinated attack to overwhelm him. But unfortunately for them, Illusia wasn't alone. By working together with Princess, they are easily able to take the monkeys down once more, but Illusia probably should have finished them off when he had the chance, because one of the monkeys gets back on its feet and starts making a loud whistling sound that's the equivalent of Megumi calling Big Raga for help. A moment later, Illusia senses something big coming his way, and before he knows it, the alpha monkey has shown up, fully intent on defending its pack. Illusia is a bit intimidated since he wasn't expecting to trigger a boss fight like this, but there's no way out of this. So he decides to take a look at the monkey's stats so he can see what he's up against. The alpha monkey's stats are for the most part on par with Illusia's stats, but there's one key advantage it has. The alpha possesses several skills that strengthen its followers, and that means the rest of the monkeys have become serious threats now. The monkeys are a lot faster and stronger than they used to be, and even with Princess helping him, the battle is still not in their favor. In fact, she gets grabbed and was nearly flung into a tree at one point, but he was able to save her at the last second. Illusia is seriously starting to worry that Princess might end up getting hurt like last time, so he needs to find a way to end this with no losses. He begs the system to give him some information on the Alpha, and he is informed that the Alpha is an evolved version of the orangutan monkeys, and it became the leader of the clan by defeating the previous clan leader in combat. That information was absolutely useless to Illusia, but he does recall seeing a telepathy ability amongst the Alpha's many skills, so he realizes he might be able to communicate with it. But first, he needs a negotiation chip, so he grabs the monkey that was poisoned earlier and holds his claws up to its neck. The Alpha sees this and stops his subordinates from attacking so it can activate its telepathy skill and ask Illusia what he's doing. Illusia tells the Alpha that the monkey he is holding hostage is currently under the effects of Princess's poison, and in due time, it will surely die, but as long as the Alpha is willing to let them go. Princess will administer an antidote. This seemed like a reasonable deal to Illusia, but the Alpha immediately refuses because he has deemed Illusia and Princess to be too much of a threat to be left alone, so he plans to eliminate them regardless of how many monkeys he may need to sacrifice. This really isn't good since Illusia can't guarantee that he and Princess will win against the Alpha and his monkeys, but that's when he comes up with the idea to challenge the Alpha to a duel. According to monkey traditions, the leader is required to accept any duel requests, and failure to do so will act as proof that the Alpha is a bitch, so he accepts Illusia's proposal. But he has one of his monkeys grab Princess beforehand to make sure she doesn't interfere in the duel. Illusia is relieved that he managed to turn this fight into a 1v1 since he should have better odds of winning now, but beating the Alpha still isn't going to be easy because he's got certified jungle hands. Illusia gets knocked around by the first few punches before realizing he cannot compete in raw strength, so he starts trying to roll away to create space for himself. This move greatly annoys the Alpha since running away is very disrespectful to the nature of a duel, so he tells Illusia that if he doesn't start fighting back soon, then who knows what might happen to Princess over there. Illusia realizes he needs to do something quickly, so he launches himself into the air with his roll, and while coming down, he uses his momentum to build up enough force to discombobulate the Alpha. He then uses the Alpha's resulting state of confusion to his advantage and lands several dozen blows on the Alpha's body, taking off a significant chunk of the Alpha's health. That did a lot more damage than he thought it would, and Illusia is starting to feel good about his chances of winning here, but just when he was about to go in for a finishing blow, the Alpha suddenly let out a terrifying roar, and Illusia recognizes this as the telltale sign of a second phase, which has him spooked. A moment later, the Alpha emerges and his current state has converted all of his remaining mana points into agility points, so he is now way faster than Illusia. Illusia can barely keep track of the Alpha's attacks, let alone match them in speed, so he decides to challenge the Alpha to a straight-up fist fight, with no dodging or running allowed. Now, the Alpha was under no obligation to accept, but he couldn't let himself lose aura by turning down the challenge, so he agrees to the fist fight. And both the Alpha and Illusia begin duking it out with one another. As the battle rages on, they are both left on the verge of collapse, but just before Illusia hits his limit, he manages to counter one of the Alpha's punches, landing a blow strong enough to finish him off. But unfortunately, before the Alpha died, he also threw a counter punch which knocked Illusia out, so while he may have won the battle, it is unclear if he will survive. A little while later, Illusia wakes up and finds himself back in his cave with Princess. The last thing he remembers is defeating the Monkey Chief and getting knocked out right after, so he assumes Princess must have carried him back here, but he wonders how she managed to pull that off when she's so small. It turns out that Princess had a little help, and as she turns her head to point, Illusia's attention is directed to the group of monkeys that are just hanging around in his cave. At first, he panics a little because he thinks they are here to take revenge after he killed their boss, but then he realizes that they don't seem very hostile, and after checking his stats, he discovers that he has gained the title of Monkey Chief, so they must want to become his followers. Princess is a bit apprehensive about the idea of having to share Illusia's attention with a bunch of monkeys, but Illusia thinks this is a great turn of events since it means he can pawn off all the day-to-day chores on the monkeys. As their first assignment, Illusia asks them to go out and gather some food, and to his surprise, they are really efficient when it comes to gathering, so he tells them they've done a great job, but hearing the monkeys get praised is just making Princess jealous. The monkeys then ask Illusia if they can have some of his jerky hanging in the tree, and since they are actually contributing to the household, Illusia decides to let them have it, but now he's going to have to make some more. While preparing the next batch of jerky, Illusia notices one of the monkeys paying close attention, and he realizes that if he can teach it how to cook, then he won't have to spend so much time doing food prep anymore. So he starts teaching the monkey how to cut and prepare the meat, and when it's the monkey's turn to try, it eagerly grabs a knife and attempts to do the same while Illusia watches. However, just then, Illusia feels a chill go down his spine, and as he turns around, he sees Princess burning with rage, but he has no idea what she's so upset about. In any case, the monkey seems pretty good at cooking, so Illusia thinks it's safe to leave him in charge of the jerky making, but since there are going to be a lot more mouths to feed around here, he's going to need to start storing a lot more food, and that means he's going to need to make more pots. He heads outside and starts molding a bit of clay into a pot, but as he is doing so, one of the other monkeys seems to take an interest and asks Illusia to teach him. Illusia hadn't really put much thought into it till now, but the monkeys actually have opposable thumbs, so they should be much better at making stuff like pots than he would be with his claws. He decides to give the monkey a full training course on how to form and bake pottery, and once the monkey is ready to try some on its own, Illusia points it in the direction of some clay and tells it to get to work. While the monkey is busy doing that, Illusia walks off, but then he comes across Princess trying to work with some clay to prove that she's just as useful as the monkeys are. However, Illusia has no idea what she's doing, so he tells her she's just wasting her time because there's no way she can make a pot with those tiny arms, especially since she doesn't have thumbs. He was just saying this as an observation, but Princess interpreted it as Illusia calling her useless, so she runs off in tears, and he left wondering what he did wrong. A little while later, Illusia creates a few clay tools for the remaining 2 monkeys and puts them to work widening the cave, so there will be more space for everyone to share, and seeing how useful all the monkeys have been, Princess is starting to wonder if Illusia really needs her at all. Meanwhile, back in town, Yuno and Meltia are still waiting for their other teammates to arrive. Meltia is sure that Daz and Romina must have gotten her message already, but they were probably busy with another request at the time, so it might take a while for them to get here. Either way, Meltia and Yuno aren't setting foot back in the forest until they get here, because there's no way they're going to face a plague dragon without backup. At the same time, out in the forest, That same plague dragon is currently asleep in his cave when Princess suddenly climbs on his chest and tries to get him to wake up. Illusia opens his eyes and attempts to stand up. But then he realizes that the monkeys are all holding onto his limbs, and getting them off would be too much effort, so he goes back to sleep, much to Princess's annoyance. A moment later, Illusia is woken up to the sound of the monkeys panicking because one of them is on the verge of dying. Illusia takes a look at the monkey's status and discovers that it has been poisoned, and the one responsible is none other than Princess. Illusia yells at her to hurry up and give the monkey the antidote before it croaks, and she does so everything is alright. But Illusia reminds her that it's not okay to poison allies, even if they were being a little annoying. Princess says she just wanted to get Illusia's attention because she realized they are running low on meat, and hunting is something she's good at, so she wanted to get it done before the monkeys butted in. Illusia realizes what's going on and apologizes to Princess for not paying as much attention to her recently. He says the two of them can go hunting together, just like old times, and Princess is really happy to hear that since it means she finally gets to spend time with Illusia. Meanwhile, back at the village, it has been a few days since Meltia and Yuno left, and Miria is starting to get impatient, so she's thinking about heading out into the forest on her own to search for Daz again, despite the fact that she knows it's way too risky. At the same time, Illusia and Princess head out into the forest to hunt, but Princess is a little disappointed because she didn't think Illusia was going to bring the monkeys on their hunt. Illusia thought this would be a good chance to see how strong the monkeys have gotten, especially since he just made them all weapons. But seeing Illusia focus so much on the monkeys makes Princess feel even more insignificant. Illusia asks her to keep an eye out for any prey, so she silently walks ahead to act as the scout, but Illusia can tell that she's upset about something. He has no idea what he did wrong since he and Princess don't speak the same language, so he's just been guessing what she's trying to say based on her sounds and gestures. Just then, Princess informs Illusia that there are monsters up ahead, and a moment later, two wolves emerge from the bushes, so Illusia tells her to get ready to take them down together. However, before Illusia and Princess could do anything, the monkeys all go into attack mode and start beating the wolves to death with their tools. Illusia is a little surprised since he wasn't expecting the monkeys to jump in like that, but he's glad that they are capable of handling themselves in a fight. However, Princess is still mad. Elsewhere in the forest, Miria has been searching all over for any signs of Daz, but then she realizes that she's going a little too deep into the forest, so she might be better off returning before she gets herself into serious danger. However, before she could get herself to safety, she catches a glimpse of Daz through the trees, and she is overjoyed to have finally found him, so she runs over while calling out his name. Daz doesn't respond to her and walks further into the forest, but instead of taking this as a sign to turn around and get the fuck out of here. Miria ignores all the red flags and chases Daz into the forest until she is eventually cornered by these creatures. Back with Illusia, he has finally realized that Princess is feeling neglected, so he tries to explain to her that it's not like he doesn't want to pay attention to her, but since he's the chief of the monkeys now, he has to take care of them. Princess understands that, but she's still upset that she doesn't get to spend as much time with Illusia as usual, so Illusia promises that next time they go hunting, it will just be the two of them. Princess is delighted to hear this, so she jumps into Illusia's arms and starts licking his face. Illusia assures Princess that right now, she is the most important person in his life, and there's nothing that could ever change that. But just then, he hears a scream in the forest, and he immediately recognizes it as Miria's voice. He wants to rush over to help her as soon as possible, but he is a little worried that there might be other humans near Miria. After all, while Miria didn't attack him, the last few times he encountered humans, he was nearly killed. He can't risk bringing Princess into such a dangerous situation, so he tells her to wait here while he goes to deal with the situation. However, Princess is sick of getting sidelined, so she chases after Illusia at top speed and tries to follow him. Illusia warns her that she shouldn't be going so fast at her current level, and a moment later, his point is proven because Princess runs headfirst into a rock and knocks herself out. Illusia stops to check on her, and thankfully, she still has a decent chunk of her health remaining, so she should be alright, but Illusia still needs to go save Miria, so he tells Princess to stay put while he handles it. On Miria's end, she has been cornered by a bunch of wolves, and she stands no chance of beating them, so she can do nothing but watch as her impending doom approaches. However, before the wolves could attack her, Illusia jumps in and punches one out of the way. He was hoping that Miria would recognize him, but with the evolutions he has gone through since they last met, she has no idea who Illusia is. He decides to focus on dealing with the wolves for now, so he turns to them and scans with the system to see what he's up against. The wolves are all low D rank, so it should be possible for Illusia to take them out, But the wolves have an ability that allows them to share visual information with their entire pack, which means there are probably more on their way here right now, so he needs to deal with them as quickly as possible. He tries to view their stats as well, but for some reason, the system won't allow him to view their stats, so there's definitely something going on here, but Illusia has no idea what it is. The wolves all attack Illusia at once, so he uses his fire breath to burn 2 instantly, and then proceeds to knock the remaining 2 out with 1 punch, leaving just him and Miria. Miria is absolutely terrified because she thinks she's about to be eaten by a plague dragon, but Illusia has no intention of harming her. He tries to convince Miria that he's not a threat to her, but he doesn't speak her language, so he ends up flailing his arms around randomly. And this action reminds Miria of what the baby dragon did when she first found it, so she realizes that the dragon in front of her must be the same one from back then. She gets up and tries imitating Illusia to let him know that she recognizes him, and Illusia is really happy. But just then, another group of wolves shows up, and it's too dangerous for Illusia to face them while protecting Miria, so he signals for her to get on his back and then he starts running away.